A wrong number usually ends with an awkward apology. For Deborah Kellum, it ended with a war, trapped in a locked bathroom with broken ribs, hiding from a man who wore respect like a mask and wielded power like a weapon. She tried to text her brother for help. Her hands were shaking too hard. She mistyped one digit. That message didn't go to her brother. It went to the tactical burner phone of Robert Sheldon, a former Navy SEAL who'd walked away from everything except the ghosts he couldn't save, a number that hadn't received a text in 2 years. What happens when a desperate victim accidentally summons a man who's been waiting for one last mission? The answer is swift, brutal, and absolutely unforgiving. Before we continue, please tell us where in the world you are tuning in from. We love seeing how far our stories travel. Deborah had been with Eric Dalton for 3 years, and for 3 years she'd been slowly disappearing. Eric was a corporate lawyer with connections that reached into every corner of the city: judges, police captains, city officials. Everyone respected him. Everyone trusted him. And that's exactly what made him so dangerous, because a man who smiled at charity galas was the same man who just put his fist through Deborah's ribs hard enough to crack a bone. It happened over something stupid. Deborah wanted to visit her brother for the weekend. Eric didn't like that idea. They argued, and then suddenly they weren't arguing anymore, because Eric's hand was around her throat, and then his fist was in her side, and then Deborah was on the bathroom floor, wondering how she'd gotten there so fast. Eric locked her in the apartment when he left. Not just the bathroom, the entire apartment. He had the only key to the deadbolt, and he made sure she knew that calling for help would be useless. After all, who would the police believe? The respected attorney or his unstable girlfriend? Having another episode? So Deborah did the only thing she could think of. She texted her brother, Danny, and gave him the address and door code, begging him to hurry. Except her hands were shaking so badly that she mistyped one digit in his number. The message went somewhere else entirely. It went to Robert Sheldon. Robert was putting his daughter Veronica to bed when the phone buzzed. Not his regular phone. The other one, the burner phone he kept charged in his nightstand. The one connected to a number he'd given out exactly twice in his entire life. Both times to people who were now dead. That phone hadn't made a sound in 2 years. When it finally did, Robert knew immediately that someone was in serious trouble. He read the message 3 times. Broken ribs. Can't breathe. Door code included. Either this was legitimate or it was a trap. Robert had dealt with both. He kissed Veronica goodnight, called his sister Maria to come watch her, and started making phone calls. 40 minutes later, Robert and 2 of his former team members were parked outside 2847 Ashland Avenue. They'd come prepared. Tactical gear, medical supplies, and a very specific set of skills that most people hope they'd never need. Robert punched in the door code 8,890, and the building entrance clicked open. They moved through the hallways like smoke, silent and fast. Apartment 4C's door was locked from the outside. Robert picked it in under 15 seconds. Inside, they found Deborah collapsed in the bathroom, barely conscious, her breathing shallow and wrong. Robert had seen enough injuries to know her ribs were genuinely broken. This wasn't a trap. This was a woman who'd run out of options. He wrapped her in a thermal blanket and carried her out. She was surprisingly light, or maybe he was just used to carrying heavy things. Either way, she barely stirred as they moved through the building and into the waiting vehicle. They were loading her into the SUV when Eric came back. Eric saw them immediately, saw his girlfriend being carried away by armed men. And instead of calling the police like a normal person would, he made a crucial mistake. He tried to stop them himself. He stepped into Robert's path and demanded to know what they thought they were doing with his fiancée. Robert looked at Eric for a long moment. He saw the expensive suit, the confident posture, the entitled rage in his eyes. He'd met 1,000 men like Eric, men who thought power meant they were untouchable. Robert set Deborah gently in the vehicle, closed the door, and turned back to Eric. "She's not your anything anymore," Robert said simply. Eric made another mistake. He reached for Robert's arm. The fight if you could call it that, lasted approximately 6 seconds. When it was over, Eric was on the pavement with a broken nose and a very clear understanding that there were still people in the world who didn't care about his connections. Robert got in the SUV and drove away. Behind them, Eric pulled out his phone and started making calls. He knew people, important people, people who owed him favors. If he couldn't get Deborah back legally, he'd get her back another way. The war had begun. Deborah woke up in a room she didn't recognize. High ceilings, thick curtains, medical equipment beside the bed that looked expensive and new. For a moment, panic seized her. Where was she? Had Eric moved her somewhere? Then the pain in her ribs reminded her of everything, and she remembered the men, the vehicle, the stranger who'd carried her like she weighed nothing. A woman entered the room, not a nurse. She moved wrong for that, more like security. She introduced herself as Maria and explained that Deborah was in Robert Sheldon's home, that she was safe, and that her ribs had been properly wrapped by someone who knew what they were doing. Maria didn't explain who Robert was or why he'd come for her. She just said he'd be in to talk soon. Robert's home wasn't a home. It was a fortress. Deborah learned this over the next few days as she recovered. The estate sat on 15 acres outside the city, surrounded by walls, cameras, and enough security measures to make a bank jealous. Robert explained, in his quiet way, that he'd made enemies during his time in the service. The kind of enemies who hold grudges. He'd built this place to protect the one thing that mattered to him, his daughter Veronica. Veronica was 8 years old, all wild curls and endless questions. She treated Deborah's presence like an adventure, bringing her books and drawings, chattering about school and her favorite shows. The girl had her father's intensity, but none of his darkness. She was pure light in a house built for war. Robert explained the situation to Deborah on her third day there. Eric had filed a police report claiming Deborah had attacked him during a psychotic episode. He provided photos of his injuries, the broken nose Robert had given him, as evidence. There was now a warrant out for Deborah's arrest. If she went to police, they'd take her straight to Eric. The system that was supposed to protect her had been weaponized against her. So what do I do? Deborah asked. You stay here, Robert said. You heal, and you let me handle Eric. Deborah wanted to argue, wanted to say she couldn't hide forever, couldn't let Robert fight her battles. But the truth was, she had no other options. Eric had taken everything from her, her freedom, her safety, even her ability to trust the law. All she had left was the mercy of a stranger who'd answered a wrong number. Over the following weeks, Deborah learned about Robert. He'd been a Navy SEAL for 12 years, doing the kind of work that didn't make the news. He'd left the service after his wife died in a car accident, determining that Veronica needed a father more than the Navy needed another operator. But leaving life didn't mean forgetting the skills. Robert had simply redirected them toward protecting his daughter and, occasionally, helping people who'd run out of other options. Why did you come for me? Deborah asked one evening. They were sitting on the porch while Veronica did homework inside. You didn't know me. That message could have been anything. Robert was quiet for a long time. I kept that phone number active for people I couldn't save. He finally said, people who died because I was too late, or too far away, or just not good enough. I gave their families that number and told them if they ever needed anything, to call. None of them ever did. When your message came through, I thought maybe I was getting a second chance. Turns out you just had bad aim with your contacts list. Lucky me, Deborah said. Yeah, Robert agreed. Lucky you. But luck was about to run out, because Eric wasn't the type to accept defeat. He'd spent weeks using his connections to locate Deborah, and he'd finally succeeded. More importantly, he'd realized that legal channels weren't going to work. Robert Sheldon had no official existence, no social media, no public records, nothing that could be used against him in court. Eric needed a different approach. He needed men who didn't care about courts. If you're listening right now, help me prove something wrong. My dad said I wouldn't even reach 1,000 subscribers, but I believe stories like this deserve to be heard. Help me show her that these tales matter. Please subscribe to this channel, and let's keep breathing life into stories that were never meant to stay hidden. Now let's continue. The first sign of trouble came on a Tuesday. Robert's security system picked up a vehicle that drove past the state 3 times in 2 hours. Different routes, same destination. Someone was doing reconnaissance. Robert doubled the patrols and started sleeping in shifts. Deborah noticed the change immediately. Robert became quieter, more focused. The easy conversations they'd started having disappeared. Veronica picked up on it too, asking her father why he seemed worried. Robert told her everything was fine, that he was just being careful. Veronica didn't believe him. 8-year-olds are better lie detectors than most adults give them credit for. Robert finally told Deborah the truth on Thursday. Eric had hired people, not local thugs, professionals, the kind of men who did extractions and didn't ask questions about legality. They'd been watching the estate, mapping the security, looking for weaknesses. An attack was coming, probably within the next 72 hours. "I can get you out," Robert said. "I have contacts in Europe. New identity, new life. You and Veronica both. We leave tonight, and Eric never finds you." Deborah thought about it, really thought about it. Running meant safety. Running meant Veronica wouldn't be in danger. Running meant Eric won, but at least everyone would be alive. "What about you?" she asked. "I stay," Robert said. "Someone has to make sure they don't follow you. Someone has to end this." "You mean someone has to die?" Robert didn't deny it. Deborah had spent 3 years being afraid. 3 years making herself smaller, quieter, more convenient. 3 years of letting Eric define who she was and what she was worth. And in that moment, sitting in Robert's fortress with an 8-year-old girl, doing homework in the next room, something inside Deborah broke. Or maybe it finally healed. Either way, she made a decision. "I'm not running," she said. Deborah, "I'm not running," she repeated, stronger this time. "You saved me because I sent a message to the wrong number. Pure accident. You didn't have to come, didn't have to bring me here, didn't have to protect me, but you did. And now Eric's coming for you because of me. So no, I'm not running. I'm staying. And I'm fighting." Robert studied her for a long moment. "You're a nurse, not a soldier. Then teach me to be both." They had 48 hours. Robert used them well. He taught Deborah the basics, how to move through the house tactically, where the weapons were hidden, how to use a security system, and basic first aid for gunshot wounds. She was a fast learner, probably because her life depended on it. Robert also revealed something Deborah hadn't known. The estate had a medical bay in the basement, fully equipped for emergency surgery. It was left over from his Navy days, when he had to treat team members who couldn't risk going to a hospital. "If things go wrong," Robert said, "you might have to use it." "I did 2 years of nursing school," Deborah said. "I'm not a doctor. Neither am I, but I've sewn up more bullet wounds than most surgeons. You'll manage." Veronica was sent to stay with Maria at a safe house 2 hours away. She didn't want to go, didn't understand why her father was being so serious. Robert knelt, looked his daughter in the eyes, and promised he'd see her soon. Veronica made him pinky swear. He did. After Veronica left, the estate became something different. The home disappeared, and the fortress took over. Robert and his 2 team members, Jake and Marcus, both former special operations, prepared for a siege. They reinforced entry points, staged ammunition, and set up fallback positions. Deborah helped where she could, mostly by staying out of the way and memorizing the defensive plan. The attack came on Saturday night, just after midnight. 12 men, heavily armed, moving with military precision. They cut the power first, then breached the perimeter in 3 locations simultaneously. Robert had expected this. He'd fought in enough wars to know how professionals operated. The battle was loud and chaotic. Deborah stayed in the basement like Robert had ordered, listening to gunfire above her and trying not to imagine all the ways this could go wrong. The security monitors showed her everything. Jake taking down 2 intruders at the east entrance, Marcus defending the garage, Robert moving to the house like a predator who'd finally been permitted to hunt. Then one of the monitors went dark. Then another. Someone was disabling the cameras. Getting closer to the basement, Deborah grabbed the pistol Robert had left her and waited. The basement door exploded inward. A man came through, body armor and tactical gear, rifle raised. He saw Deborah and smiled like he had just found a prize. "There you are," he said. "Eric's been looking for you." Deborah raised the pistol with shaking hands. The man laughed. He started to say something else, probably something threatening, when Robert appeared behind him and ended the conversation permanently. "You okay?" Robert asked. "Define okay," Deborah managed. "Not shot. That's the current bar." They secured the basement and returned upstairs. The attack was over. 8 of the 12 intruders were down. The other 4 had retreated when they realized the job was harder than advertised. Jake had taken a bullet to the shoulder, but would survive. Marcus was fine. Robert had a graze across his ribs that he barely acknowledged. But the night wasn't over, because one of the intruders had made it past all of them. He'd gone upstairs, looking for valuables or leverage or maybe just a way out. And he'd found the one thing Robert couldn't lose. He'd found Veronica's room. Robert saw the open door and went completely still. The kind of still that predators do right before they strike. He moved up the stairs without making a sound, and Deborah followed. They found the intruder in Veronica's room, going through her things, looking for something worth stealing. What happened next was fast. Robert didn't give the man a chance to surrender, didn't offer warnings. He simply removed the threat with a kind of efficiency that reminded Deborah exactly what Robert used to do for a living. It was brutal and necessary and over in seconds. After, Robert stood in his daughter's empty room, breathing hard, staring at the stuffed animals and drawings like he was memorizing them. "If she'd been here," he said quietly. "If I'd kept her here." "But you didn't," Deborah said. "She's safe." "You made sure of that." Robert nodded but didn't look convinced. They went back downstairs to assess the damage and secure the wounded. That's when they realized the night had one more surprise. One of the downed intruders wasn't dead. He was just very good at playing dead. And the moment Robert's back was turned, the man raised his weapon and fired. The bullet caught Robert in the upper chest, just below the collarbone. He went down hard, and for a horrible moment, Deborah thought he was dead. Then he moved, tried to reach his weapon, and she knew he was alive, but not for long if she didn't do something. Jake put down the shooter. Marcus called for medical support, but they both knew the ambulance would take too long. Robert was losing blood fast. The basement medical bay was their only option. Deborah had never performed surgery. She'd watched procedures during her nursing training, had assisted a few times, but she'd never been the one holding the scalpel. Her hands were shaking as she cut away Robert's shirt and saw the wound. The bullet had gone clean through, which was good, but it had also nicked something important, based on how much blood there was. "You said you'd sewn up bullet wounds before," Deborah said, trying to keep her voice steady. Robert's eyes were starting to glaze. "Not on myself." "Then walk me through it." He did. Between gasps of pain and moments where consciousness slipped, Robert talked her through every step. Deborah worked with hands that wouldn't stop shaking and a mind that kept screaming, this is insane. You can't do this. You're going to kill him." But she did it anyway. She cleaned the wound, tied off the bleeding, stitched the damage with a kind of precision she didn't know she had. It took 2 hours. When she finally stepped back, covered in blood and exhausted beyond measure, Robert was still breathing, still alive. She'd done it. "Not bad," Robert muttered, "for a dropout." "I'm going to stab you again if you're not careful," Deborah said, but she was smiling. Robert recovered over the next week. Slowly, painfully, but steadily. The police never came. Eric had made sure the attack stayed off the books. But Eric himself went very quiet. His mercenaries had failed. Several of them were dead, and the rest had gone into hiding. Attacking Robert Sheldon had proved to be a catastrophically bad investment. More importantly, word got around, in the circles where men like Eric operated. There were whispers now. Whispers about the woman he'd abused who'd found protection from someone far more dangerous than Eric ever could be. Whispers about Eric's failure, his weakness, his inability to control a situation. In the world of powerful men, reputation is everything. Eric's reputation was now ruined. 2 weeks after the attack, Deborah received a call. It was from Eric's lawyer. Eric wanted to drop all charges. He wanted Deborah to sign a non-disclosure agreement. He wanted to pretend none of this had ever happened. In exchange, he'd leave her alone forever. Deborah looked at Robert. He nodded. "Your call," he said. She thought about it. Thought about 3 years of abuse, broken ribs, locked doors, and a system that failed her. Thought about the wrong number that had saved her life. Thought about Veronica's drawing still hanging on the refrigerator. About Jake's shoulder healing. About Robert's scar that would always remind him of the night he'd almost died protecting her. "Tell Eric no," Deborah said into the phone. "Tell him I'm not signing anything. Tell him if he ever comes near me again, he'll learn exactly what I learned. That some strangers are more loyal than the people who claim to love you. And some strangers are a lot more dangerous than he is." She hung up. Eric never called again. 3 months later, Deborah was still living at the estate. She'd finished her nursing degree online and was working at a private clinic that Robert's contacts had set up. Veronica had taken to calling her Aunt Deb, which made Robert smile every time. The fortress was still a fortress, but it felt like a home now, too. One evening, Deborah and Robert were sitting on the porch again, watching the sun set over property. Veronica was inside, teaching herself guitar with the kind of determination only 8-year-olds possess. "You ever think about that wrong number?" Deborah asked. "Every day," Robert said. "Think it was really wrong? Or think maybe it went exactly where it needed to?" Robert considered this. "I think sometimes the universe gets tired of watching bad things happen to good people. That's very philosophical for a guy who shoots people for a living. I don't shoot people for a living anymore. Now I just intimidate them." Deborah laughed. For the first time in years, it felt genuine. She'd come here broken, traumatized, convinced she was a victim who needed saving. She'd learned something different. She'd learned that victims could become survivors, and survivors could become fighters, and fighters could become protectors. She'd learned that family wasn't always the people you were born to. Sometimes, family was a stranger who answered a wrong number at midnight and decided that one more person's life was worth saving. She'd learned that she wasn't a damsel in a tower waiting for rescue. She was a war itself, and she'd finally learned how to fight. Domestic violence thrives in silence and isolation, which is why reaching out for help, even imperfectly, even to the wrong person, can save your life. Deborah's story teaches us that abuse escalates, that powerful abusers weaponize systems meant to protect victims, and that leaving is often the most dangerous time. But it also teaches us that recovery isn't about remaining a victim forever. It's about reclaiming agency, building new support systems, and understanding that healing means developing your own strength. Real-world resources like the National Domestic Violence Hotline 1-800-799-7233 exist because survivors need connections to people who believe them, protect them, and help them rebuild. Sometimes the person who saves you is a stranger. Sometimes it's yourself, and sometimes it's both. The lesson isn't that you need a Navy SEAL to rescue you. It's that you need to recognize abuse, reach out for help without shame, and understand that surviving violence makes you a fighter, not a failure. So here's the real question. Did you subscribe yet? Thousands of people will listen to this story and won't subscribe. Please don't be that person. If you're listening right now, help me prove something wrong. My dad said I wouldn't even reach 1,000 subscribers, but I believe stories like this deserve to be heard. Help me show her that these tales matter. Please subscribe to this channel, and let's keep breathing life into stories that were never meant to stay silent. And here's what I need to know. Do you want part two?